Welcome to our session with Charles Jennings. Charles, thank you again for joining us at DeakinPrime, and we're very excited about the publication and arrival of your latest book and research around 70-20-10, which you've been championing for some time. Why now? Why is now the right time for this book?
Well, thanks very much, Kate, and that's a really good question, why now, because it is apparent to me, and I've been working with this 70-20-10 model for 17 years now, and was involved in learning for a long time before that. I think it's a perfect storm, to be honest. I think that we're seeing a perfect storm in that there are some major challenges at the macro level economically, globally. So organisations are facing real challenges in terms of productivity and how they can increase productivity of their people and of their organisations and how they can do things better. At the same time, we've got challenges in terms of increased demands for agility. There's change going on increasingly. I hardly work with any organisation that isn't having some sort of transformation in order to do things better and differently. And I think many organisations have realised that the traditional models that we're using, where we bring people in and we train them and we put them out back into the workplace and assume that they're going to be well prepared to do their jobs and do their jobs better, are finding that in many cases that doesn't happen. And it's not because that model, the training, the core of that isn't done well. Often it's done well, but it's just inappropriate. And that more is needed. And I often describe 70-20-10 as being a way to extend learning and improve performance. And first of all, it's about focusing on performance. And secondarily, it's about bringing in all the levers or pulling all the levers that we have in order to improve their performance. And sometimes those levers are structured training programs, structured learning, the 10. More often, they're part of the 70 and 20. They're part of ways in which we can improve, help people do their jobs better by doing things in the workplace, whether that's getting people together and learning through maybe having a really good mentoring scheme when people come into an organisation and a good solid support in that way, whether it's around building communities of practice or professional communities, whether it's simply helping managers, and this is a really key piece of work that needs to get done, helping managers understand that they are really critical in terms of building performance within their organisations. I hate to say it to learning and development people and HR people, but usually managers have potentially more influence than L&D and HR ever can. And managers need to understand that it's not, the challenge isn't a trade-off between achieving operational excellence and developing your people. We all know that any one of us has a set of objectives. We've got we have a performance review. We need to hit our targets, and in some cases we need to get our bonuses. So it's not a trade-off of just doing that or developing your people. You actually have to do both, because hitting your targets is important for your organisation, important for us as individuals, and that's usually on an annual cycle. So I call that a tactical thing that we need to do. Whereas developing our people, in other words, making sure that our pipeline, that we retain our people, that we build capability, that's much more longer term, it's more strategic in a way. And if you leave that to one side and just focus on the tactical stuff, achieving the tactical stuff becomes more difficult year on year. So part of the 70-20-10, part of that mindset change is around helping key stakeholders and often senior executives and managers understand that continuous improvement is the way to go about making sure that you remain competitive, or remain, if you're a government organisations or agency, remain providing a good quality service, whilst pretty well every organisation around the world, bar a few, are cost constrained. So 70-20-10, why now, is that 70-20-10 really fits that very well. It's a vehicle and a mechanism to help us to do more with less, although it's not about doing things cheaper, although sometimes that's the outcome, but I would always advise against people adopting 70-20-10 just to take cost out, although I've not worked with any organisation where over the long term it's been more costly to use it. But it's really around being more responsive, building higher performance, making sure that we're linking learning to performance and performance to productivity in whatever form. So why now is I think that there's an increasing awareness that that's what's needed, and here's a way of doing it.
Thank you, Charles. Those are some great insights. I think one of the things that baffles organisations, and I hear a lot from learning professionals, is the 70 is the hardest part. Are you able to talk us through an example of where you've seen the 70 implemented well and the sort of things that comprise the 70 effective in an organisation?
Certainly, and I think that you're absolutely right. The 70 is the quite challenging piece because we've all been through school and university or post-school training, learning, and it's been the 10. So we often find it difficult to separate learning from schooling, and we find it even more difficult to separate improving performance from schooling, because that's the way that humans. We can blame the 18th century Prussians for developing the curriculum for that, but there's some very good examples, and I often, when I work with organisations, and in fact was talking this morning with the DeakinPrime at the DeakinPrime event, that the closer to the point of use that we can support people and help people learn to do things better, the more likely it is to be embedded in daily work and daily workflow. So if we start with the 70, it's more likely to have greater impact and realise greater value for the individual and for the organisation. So if you take, for example, I would give a couple of examples. I think the work of Atul Gawande, who is a surgeon at Harvard Medical School, who has been working with health authorities around the world in terms of implementing checklists in surgeries and reducing mortality rates hugely. Not by training people more, but by simply analysing what the problem is. The problem that Gawande determined is that in a very hierarchical system, such as most surgeries are, a junior person in a surgical team would be unlikely to call up the senior surgeon and say, stop, have we checked this, have we done that? If a checklist is created and owned by everyone, everyone has the right to do it. So that's not working on improving knowledge or skills. It's working on changing the environment in order to improve performance. That's very much the 70. So providing something like a checklist. The aviation industry lives and dies on checklists. Whenever there's an accident, an air accident, one of the first things that's done is a review of the checklists to work out whether the failing was due to the checklist and whether that can be adapted and improve the safety record. So that's one aspect of starting with the 70. But also in terms of ensuring that learning is closest to work, I think another aspect that's really important, and organisations find it really difficult to do, is that we know that a lot of learning comes out of reflection. We do something, we step back, we look at it, we think, I could have done better if it were done this way, or that worked really well. And I've spoken with many, many managers who say we don't have time to reflect. And I think I usually respond by saying, actually, you don't have time not to reflect, because that's a great opportunity. So if you take a situation where, for example, and I will give you an example here where Citibank, large, 250,000 people, employees in Citibank, have adopted a technique that I've used in the past, and that is giving managers 3 questions to ask when they have their one-to-one meeting with their reports. There are 3 questions that they ask to get a discussion around reflection. So the questions are, tell me what you've been doing. Tell me about the challenges you've had recently, about the successes you've had. The second question is, well, if you step back and had a little bit of time to think about how you do it differently, what would you do? And the last question is, what learnings come out of that? So just a simple little technique like that. And I've seen managers use this really well. And at Citibank, they have a little credit card type, of course, being a bank, a little credit card type solution that are given to managers to put into their handbag or their purse or their wallet. And they can ask those questions. And so just really a trigger for reflective practice. Reflecting on what's been going on and what might be done differently and what learning's coming out of that really has an impact in terms of improving performance. It doesn't take much time. It can be done in 5 minutes and yet can have as much or greater impact than taking people out of work and getting them to understand exactly how something should be done and then putting them back into the workplace. So there's lots and lots of ways in which we can exploit that 70. That's how we learn through experience, and it might be, again, something similar, something simple, such as ensuring that people have stretch assignments and job swaps and all those sorts of things that, again, need to be enabled by the manager or the team leader. But those sorts of things are ways in which you'll build continuous development cultures and the way that you can improve performance.
Fantastic. You make it sound simple, Charles. And I
It's
think
not simple.
Parts of it can be, I suppose.
Yeah.
The other thing I know I get a lot of questions about is the business case for looking at the 70 and 20 elements of learning. And a lot of learning professionals I speak to struggle to describe and tell the story to their stakeholders and those who have the purse strings about why this investment should be made. And are you able to tell us a little bit about the sort of research that people can access to help them get others on board?
Well, there's a recent piece of work which I contributed to that's published by a British organisation called Towards Maturity that benchmark. They're a benchmarking organisation. And Towards Maturity asked in a survey that was carried out just at the end of 2015 and published in early 2016, they looked at organisations that are using 70-20-10 or models which are based around 70-20-10 that are exploiting social and experiential learning in the workplace. And in terms of the business case, the evidence that came out of that work is really quite compelling. For example, organisations that utilise 70-20-10 in various ways, their employees are likely to be 4 times more engaged. In other words, employee engagement is increased by a factor of 4. The business agility and the ability to respond to business problems goes up hugely. So there's a lot of data that's come out of that piece of research. And there's other research that's shown that where team leaders and managers are effective and focused at developing their people, those people outperform others by around about 25%. And I often present it when I'm talking to managers in terms of the business case for doing this. I ask the question, how would you like everyone to do an extra day's work in your organisation every week? There's no cost to you, no cost to the organisation. It doesn't mean they have to come in on their day off. It's simply if you support your team leaders and managers to become developers of people, that's the outcome, because the research done by the Corporate Executive Board some years ago now showed that performance of people who have managers focused on developing them as part of the workflow, performance goes up by about 25%, employee engagement goes up by about 40%, even the ability to continue to be productive in times of change. So if your organisation is going through a merger and acquisition, a downsizing or some major change, those people whose managers are focused on developing them as part of the workflow will continue to be productive over those, more productive than those who are not. So there's a lot of data to show or to support the fact that helping learning occur as part of the daily workflow is a good business case. It's not just a nice thing to do, it's actually there's very, very good sound business reasons for doing it.
Thank you so much, Charles, for sharing some of your insights with us. It's a terrific book. I've enjoyed reading it immensely. Thank you for joining us for a little bit of time with Charles Jennings today. We're very grateful to Charles and very much enjoy our partnership. We see Charles as a bit of a mentor to the DeakinPrime family. So thanks again, Charles.